My father was born in Iran in 1942. He moved to the United States when he was around 20 years old. Growing up, he never spoke much about where he came from. He never spoke his language. He never spoke about his culture or his family. My mother's an Italian American, and that was the culture I grew up in. I grew up thinking that I was an Italian American on one half, and the other half, well, I knew it was Iranian, but I had no idea what that meant. There were so many things that didn't make sense. Why did I look different than the other kids in school? Why did we have to take our shoes off when we came into the house? Why did the women on his side of the family wear scarves over their heads? I never understood any of it, and I never got an explanation for any of it. There was one thing that my father talked about from time to time, and that was the Prophet Muhammad from his religion, Islam. We didn't hear much about Islam, but every once in a while, he would tell us something that Muhammad had taught. Hearing these outbursts didn't make much sense to us, because we didn't really understand the context, and after about 5 minutes, my father would drop the subject. But it was a window that, at the time, maybe didn't mean much to me, but as I've gotten older, has become extremely important. Since my dad worked all the time, I never really had an opportunity to ask any questions. So I just grew up feeling splintered. Part of me was just not there. It was just empty. But I never really realized that. I just always felt sort of off. I felt so confused, in fact, that I didn't even link it to my culture. I never even thought that the feeling I had anything to do with my identity. I spent years trying to figure out why I felt uncomfortable in my own skin, and years trying to have a relationship with my absent father. But despite my best efforts, could do neither. So I stopped trying. But I remained angry at my father. And to some degree I had good reason to. Like any child will be angry at their parent for spending too much time at work. But there was something else going on, something deeper, that I couldn't possibly have ever realized at the time. I'm currently a student at Starr King School for the Ministry in Berkeley, California. And as luck would have it, in the fall of 2008, the school sponsored a trip to Turkey to study Sufism. And as someone who's been interested in the mystics of every tradition, and as someone who also loves to travel, I decided to go. And so on December 6, 2008, I embarked on a pilgrimage to Istanbul and Konya, Turkey, for 2 weeks. And I hadn't the foggiest clue what I was in for. Being in Turkey was the first time in my life that I was surrounded by people like my father. They looked like him. Some of them actually spoke his language. They were Muslim, and they were not afraid to talk about their culture. It was amazing. I actually had no idea how to process it. The first night in Konya, there was a zikr, which is a traditional Sufi worship ceremony that was filled with Persians. And when I walked into the room, it was like coming home.
من غلام قمرم غیر قمر هیچ مگو پیش من جز سخن شمع و شکر هیچ مگو سخن رنج مگو جز سخن گنج مگو ور از این بیخبری رنج مبر هیچ مگو. دوش دیوانه شدم، عشق مرا دید و بگفت، آمدم نعره مزن جام مدر، هیچ مگو. گفتم ای عشق من از چیز دگر می ترسم. گفت آن چیز دگر نیست دگر، هیچ مگو.
Being around all of these Persians and in this predominantly Muslim country was amazing because I was finally seeing the same things that I had grown up with that had been mysteries. People were kissing each other on both cheeks. That's something that I had grown up with and never understood, and that's certainly something people don't do in America. People were taking their shoes off before they entered the house. People ate dinner sitting on the floor of the living room rather than on a table. Tiny little things that may have seemed insignificant were slowly getting pieced together, and I began to realize that all of the things growing up that, for me, were really weird and really unexplainable actually had explanations. They actually came from my father's culture. They weren't the result of him just being a strange, domineering old man. They were parts of his cultural identity that he took with him and was trying, however clumsily, to impart to us. And as I began to piece all of these things together, I realized what was happening was I was finally starting to feel close to my father. There I was in Turkey, thousands of miles from home, feeling like I had finally met my father for the first time. I had embarked on this trip to Turkey to learn about Sufism for my master's degree. I had left behind the questions of my identity years ago, and I had given up trying to unravel the mystery of my father. Never did I imagine that this journey would bring a feeling of wholeness that I had been searching for throughout my entire life. The focus of our trip was on Rumi, the famous Sufi poet, and so much of his poetry was about love. I truly believe that through the grace of Allah, the name given to the God that my father has spent his life praying to, something that has always seemed impossible, even unthinkable, actually occurred. Years of confusion and pain and mystery began to be washed away by love.
When you are talking to me, just talk about the candle, sweetness, and love. Don't say anything unless and but love. Don't talk about the troubles. Only talk about the treasures and love. And be happy for knowing everything and knowing anything about love.